مسافر وحدك وفايتني.
Throughout the 1930s and 40s, while most of the world was marred by war and Great Depression, one country was undergoing a different situation.
The modernization of Cairo was due to Ismail Pasha, first of the Khedives.
Egypt. Egypt at this time was a place where Muslims, Jews, and Christians lived, for the most part, in peace with one another under one nation. It was a nation of modern streets and buildings, a nation of actors, actresses, musicians, and artists who dressed mostly as they liked, and their performances reached as far as Morocco and Iraq. Yet, not everything was great. There was in fact much trouble in paradise. This is the liberal era. This is episode 9 of Egypt's recent history. Last episode, the 1919 revolution happened and the country gained formal independence from Great Britain. That episode is in the description. The group which led the revolution, as we saw last time, was called the Wafd Party. The Wafd was a nationalist, secularist party, and this was the Wafd Party's flag, the crescent representing Islam and the cross for Christianity. Those weren't the only two Egyptian religions, however. Take a look at this actress. Her name is Leila Murad. She was one of the biggest Egyptian actresses of her time, and she was Jewish. You heard that right. According to Wikipedia, there were over 70,000 Egyptian Jews by 1948, just as much Egyptian as their Christian and Muslim counterparts were. Jews were in fact represented by the third star on the Egyptian flag at this time. As for Leila Murad, she converted to Islam in 1946. Besides that though, she was one of the most famous actresses of her time, among other artists like these ones. The company that made their movies was this one, Studio Misr. Studio Misr was really the only movie studio at this time, but the movies that they made were very, very, very famous. Not just in Egypt, but in the rest of the Arab world, Mashriq and Maghreb. As Moroccan writer Mariam al-Abbasi says in this article, quote, "Despite having never been there, I can confirm that I am pretty familiar with Egyptian culture and can understand 80% of what an Egyptian says, all thanks to Egyptian cinema." That's without mentioning the musicians, people like Mohamed Abdel Wahab and Kulthum. The point of focusing on art is to give an idea of the cultural environment that existed at this time. Literature, painting, and even fashion saw similar dynamics. Nor was it just art. Religion also saw important turning points. In the second half of the 1800s, Muhammad Abduh had already stepped out from the realm of tradition by advocating that modern sciences be studied at the religious university Al-Azhar. Abbas al-Aqad and Taha Hussein would also contribute their ways of thinking about religion. Abbas al-Aqad wrote very complex books about God and the prophets, and Taha Hussein, meanwhile, would find himself challenging the status quo and balancing between the modern world and Islam. The overarching theme was Egyptian nationalism, but the country was still quite tolerant of other people. There were millions of foreigners living in the country, especially Europeans, many Greeks, Armenians, Italians, Turks, French, British, and other nationalities all lived in the country and were, for the most part, accepted. Some of their descendants still live there even today, as shown in this documentary. And as we saw with movies, the nation was a center of culture for the entire Arab world. And even while the nation was heavily influenced by European styles and norms, that didn't necessarily mean letting go of their customs and traditions, especially under the shadow of British influence. But even then, despite the liberalism, how great things seemed, there were a lot of serious issues. Egypt in those days was a very, very, very unequal nation. Farouk Osman, in this book, cites a figure saying that 5% of the population owns 65% of all the country's assets. That inequality existed with the Wafd Party. The Wafd Party tried to resist the king, and as we saw in the last episode, led the Egyptian people in their revolution against the British. As Farouk Osman in this same book says, however, when Wafdist politicians got older, some of the more skilled politicians were relegated to the back, and over time, many people saw that the Wafd represented the rich classes and not as much the poorer ones. That contributed to the creation of other political parties, such as Young Egypt. They would criticize the king and print photos of the poor to criticize the inequality at the time. And while the country was very open culturally, the country's cultural openness would also face a conservative backlash. In 1928, Hassan al-Banna founded the Muslim Brotherhood. The group grew quickly, reaching over 2 million members by 1948. At the same time, you had many Salafists. The Salafists are not the same as the Muslim Brotherhood, but they were both not exactly fans of the European influence that was coming into the nation. As for the religious establishment, they would sometimes clash with Taha Hussein, with some even saying that he insulted Islam. And then there was the king, King Farouk.
The young king on a white horse took the salute in the square of the Abdin Palace in Cairo.
The palace was still influenced by the British. And the British, mind you, still had troops in the Suez Canal and would have a say in Egypt's foreign and defense policy. King Farouk's name would also come up in a number of scandals, which didn't help his popularity at all. These things are important to say because many people look at the past and compare it to the present and think that back then everything was perfect, when in reality it was just as complex and difficult. The final days of the liberal era would be very unstable. There would be political assassinations, a giant fire in Cairo, and a revolution. A revolution that would reverberate not just in Egypt, but in the rest of the Arab world for decades to come. But before that though, there was going to be a world war. A world war which would see Egypt placed in the crosshairs of both Britain and Germany. And that is the next episode. So until then, thank you for watching.